We are here at the 2021 Interfaith Summit, brought to you by the communities responding to extreme weather and our partners that we will go over momentarily. My name is the Reverend Vernon K. Walker. I have the privilege of serving as the program manager at the communities responding to extreme weather. And this is our third annual Interfaith Summit, guided by our themes of healing, helping, and building resilience. And we want to thank you all for taking the time to be here with us. We have an exciting program lined up, and we are just hippopotamus glad about it. But before we go into the program, we just want to let you know that the program is brought to you mostly by the communities responding to extreme weather. And we, the extreme crew, better known as crew, is a part of the Better Future Project. And the aim of the Better Future Project works to build a powerful grassroots movement to address the climate crisis and advance a rapid and responsible transition beyond coal, oil, and gas towards a renewable future for us all. And our mission statement at Crew is that we aim to build equitable, inclusive neighborhood climate resilience in New England through hands-on education, service, and planning. And then I'm going to show you some of our partners, because this event would not be possible without our partnership. And we're going to highlight some of our partners, and then we will get into the land acknowledgement. Give me 1 second. So we have put on this event, this wonderful event with our co-hosts and sponsors, the Massachusetts Sierra Club, the Interfaith Worker Justice, obviously the Better Future Project, the new Night Cobb, the Creation Justice Ministry, 350 Mass, Speak for the Trees, the Welcome Project, the Boston Mountaintop, the Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light, Massachusetts Peace Action, Jewish Climate Action Network, Cooperative Metropolitan Ministries, the Massachusetts Communities Action Network, the Jewish Labor Committee, and also MashKosh. So it is in partnership that Crew brings you this event. And then we are going to go to the next phase of our program, which is the land acknowledgement. And before we get to the land acknowledgement, we're going to outline some technological features that we like you to do. Two things. There is an optional networking hour after this that we'll talk about a little bit more later. Is an optional networking hour from 4 p.m. To 5 p.m. And we, in terms of breakout groups, we will ask you to rename yourself and perhaps put your name, put a number next to your name, number 1 or number 2. Number 1 corresponds with the healing breakout group. Number 2 corresponds with the helping breakout group. And number 3 corresponds to the building resilience. For those who did not register, we will register for what breakout group you want to be a part of. We want to make sure we try to put you in the breakout group. So once again, number 1 is helping. Number 2 is healing. And number 3 is building resilience. So if you could put a number next to your name, we'll make sure we try to get you in the appropriate breakout group. So yeah, please do come, John Luke, for the land acknowledgement.
Okay. And just make sure I wanted to, okay, good. Um, so um, a bit of heavy news from the Native community from the past 24 hours. LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, leader of Standing Rock's fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline, has walked on. And definitely, as I said, it's a bit of heavy news. I wanted to just kind of like let everybody kind of know one of the things that why she committed herself to this. Because of her leadership at Standing Rock, she quickly gained national acclaim in the midst of the Dakota Access Pipeline. She reflected on why stopping the pipeline was important to her. 2 years ago, when Dakota Access first came, I looked at the pipeline map and knew that my entire world was in danger, she wrote to Yes magazine. If we allow this pipeline, we will lose everything. We are the river, and the river is us. We have no choice but to stand up. And so if you will, I will just kind of share her picture while I'm giving land acknowledgement. So as is our practice at the North American Indian Center of Boston, we recognize this land that our center is on as the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts Nation, who continue to this day in part through the lineal descendants of Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. And I would like for everybody, if you're able, and if you're comfortable, please close your eyes. And I want you to be in the place that you are right now, but I want you to project yourself back into time. I want you to take yourself back 400 years at least, where there is solid land right now, there might be water. And where you know there to be water, there might be solid land. I want you to look around and I want you to think about the people who are around you. Think about the people who lived there, who loved there, who had families, who died, who had children who carried on. And I want you to go take yourself in the space that you are, project yourself forward into time, where you are right now, but further, I want you to think about the time where your descendants will be. I want you to think about the land as we leave it for our descendants who reap the benefits of all of the work that we have done, all of the seeds that we have planted. I want you to think about that time. What about their lives? What about their families? What world are we leaving for them? And now, come back, open your eyes, and look around. I'm on the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts Nation.
I keep being kicked off and kicked off and kicked off.
Sorry. Sorry. But I want you to think about your own host tribe, and think about the promises that you can make, and the land that you can foster together. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for that wonderful land acknowledgement and leading us in a time of remembrance, John Luke. Next up on our program, we have the Defining Resilience, and that was a beautiful, heartfelt, moving land acknowledgement. And thank you so much for leading us through that process. But next up, we have we have Dr. Tallison to help define our themes that guide this year's session. Please do come to the virtual mic.
Okay, can you hear me? Good. Well, I just want to start by thanking you for inviting me back to introduce the theme again this year. And I'm coming to you from Nipmuc land here, what is currently called Marlborough by others. And I want to thank you, Jean-Luc, for that land acknowledgement. And I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about how I think about healing and helping in terms of building resilience as a way to introduce our general theme and how the other facilitators will talk about it in the breakout rooms. So some of you may remember last year, I talked a little bit about the survival skills community and how they have these ways of prioritizing which skills to focus on in the survival situation. But that all rests upon a kind of foundational idea of mindset and needing to build a kind of resilience mindset in order better to respond when we need to, so that we're not just panicking and freaking out and unable to call upon the skills that we need in the moment. And so, you know, that can mean the difference between life and death in certain situations. But it's not that we can't prepare for things and can't respond to things without attending to mindset. It's just that if we do that intentionally, then we'll be more effective and it will be less stressful, and in the end, more resilient overall to consider it and tend to it. And our cultures and our faith traditions offer really wonderful resources for developing resilience mindsets, as well as our family cultures and our family traditions. And so just to, you know, start with the concept of healing, it's sort of obvious, right, that there's physical healing, and we're kind of talking about the pandemic and about the climate at the same time today as we were last year. And sometimes, you know, we also talk about structural healing, and pandemics can actually open up a lot of awareness about gaps in resilience and inequities.
Being kicked off. I keep being kicked
Poor
off.
Sue keeps getting kicked off. I'm not sure why, Sue. I know the tech people are trying to help you, and it might be that your bandwidth is kicking you off. I hope that works out. But I'm just going to keep going for now and send good vibes your way. Anyway, so our traditions also talk about healing in terms of more kind of amorphous or intangible ideas of wellness that are kind of about, obviously, right, about things like peace and groundedness, and really importantly about grief and joy. And I like to talk in my work about serotonin and just being mindful of that as something that we need to keep tending as a way to make sure we have the energy to do the other things that we want to do as a focus of healing. So just going to quickly go through this. I'm not going to talk about everything on all of my slides, but in my tradition, there's a kind of compassionate understanding of the idea of sin, where if we feel like we're not doing everything we think we should or doing what we ought, then we ask ourselves, well, what is my wound that I'm carrying that's between me and what I should think I should be doing? And I ask myself, you know, what healing do I need? And I know that it can be tempting to berate ourselves, but it actually tends to be more effective to be compassionate. And so I've been sitting with this question, what if I'm doing my best? And that's a kind of resilience mindset building question that once we sit with, we can also start asking, well, what if other people are too? And maybe what if the things that bring us healing are actually the things that we need to be doing first? So our traditions can kind of bring us these what if type questions that can help us build this kind of resilience. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but this here talks about dopamine and pleasure versus serotonin and happiness. And while pleasure is important, sometimes at the end of a pandemic, as things begin to open up, we're sort of rushing toward pleasure, when really, that's important to eat the cake, but we need to be doing it mindfully with a long-term view of serotonin. Okay, so grieving, I'm just going to spend a tiny second on grieving, because traditions and cultures tend to offer a lot of resources for this, and it's something that everybody loves to try to leap over, because grief can be not only painful to experience, but also terrifying, because we can have the sense that if we start to grieve, we might never stop. And our traditions offer us so many ways to grieve. It doesn't have to be one specific way. It can happen in lots of ways in lots of places, and it can be communal, it can be private, it can be as simple as lighting a candle. And that's just a wonderful, very important and powerful resource that we have. And then just talking about helping, everybody kind of knows that helping actually helps us more than it helps anything else. And I just want to mention that I think it's really important that our traditions have ways to honor even very small acts, and just take a moment and be mindful of them and honor them, because even a small dollar donation gives us this sense of abundance. Like, wow, if I have $3 to give towards something that I think is important, I must have more than I need. And that kind of abundance can not only build a sense of connection and gratitude, but it can also be healing for us and help us to accept help from others too, and from all creation. So I think it's wonderful that these kinds of acts are honored from a place of abundance. And the last thing I want to say about this, maybe some of you are familiar with this theory of adaptive change, and kind of hoping that we're coming out of this pandemic chaotic space and moving more into a reorganizing space. But I just want you to focus on this upper left quadrant for a minute, because in this theory, times of reorganization are the times of the greatest uncertainty, but they're also therefore the times of the greatest resilience. Those go hand in hand. And our traditions offer us a lot of resources in times of uncertainty, so that we can actually kind of embrace the resilience that those kinds of moments offer. So to close, healing and helping can fit, like I said, into this pyramid, any of these places. And my hope is that by using our traditions together and our communities, we can remember to incorporate them, not just in the practical structural ways that are kind of really satisfying just to roll up our sleeves and get to work, but also intentionally into our mindsets of resilience, which we inherit from our cultural traditions and our faith traditions, so that we can approach this climate moment, not just with urgency and not just with grief, but also with groundedness and peacefulness, with hopefulness, and even with joy and gratitude. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive and radical, but this is actually an incredible gift that our traditions and traditions all over the world give us. And it doesn't come from a place of the privileged, sectors. It actually comes from the most vulnerable and oppressed parts of traditions. And this is a question I've been sitting with. What if it is our privilege to be alive during this climate moment? So it's a tantalizing concept that's offering us something that's alternative and countercultural. What if this is a moment for power and song? We have so many examples of this all over the world and throughout history. We have the martyrs, we have the African-American slave songs, we have the indigenous Guatemalan community, if you've read Martín Prechtel's work. We have the song Midnight Radio from Hedwig and the Angry Inch about the queer community. There's just a ton of examples that just say, lift up your hands, because there's something bigger than we are, something mighty and powerful and worth singing about. And it's alive in each one of us and all around us. So what if? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tallison. That was a wonderful sum up of of how these themes are interwoven into each other. And as we continue to go forward in this program, let us keep some of the key elements that Dr. Tallison mentioned. So we are elephant happy and tiger glad to now move into our keynote session. We have the Reverend Dr. Jim Antal with us, who is a denominational leader, climate activist, author, and public theologian. Hundreds of churches are reading his 2018 book, Climate Church, Climate World. Jim is a graduate of Princeton University and Yale Divinity School. He has preached on climate change since 1988 in over 300 settings, and has engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience on numerous occasions. In 2018, he retired as the leader of the 350 United Church of Christ churches in Massachusetts. He currently serves as a special advisor on the climate justice to the general minister and president of the United Church of Christ. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to some and present to others the wonderful Reverend Dr. Jim Antal, and welcome to the virtual mic.
Vernon, thank you so much for that. And Tallison, I just want to say I was so deeply moved by your presentation, and especially about the conclusion of it, talking about the opportunity that this time gives. I mean, it turns out we get to live in this moment of history for the future. So thank you for framing it that way. And I want to say hi to so many familiar faces and new faces who are part of this. But I want to begin by saying how especially grateful I am for the work Crew is doing, as part of this network of climate resilient hubs all over the country. Today's Interfaith Summit recognizes the essential role that houses of worship and people of faith have always played in making communities resilient. But now, as a consequence of climate change, and as the climate is ravaging more and more regions and towns, the challenge of understanding and preparing and responding to crisis after crisis provides houses of worship and people of faith with, as Tallison was suggesting, a new opportunity. So for the next few minutes, I'll try to set the stage for you to engage more deeply with your head, heart, and hands in the workshops that follow. And let me apologize in advance for having to step out of this gathering when I conclude, because I have another commitment. So let's begin with some good news. 85% of Americans agree that we have a moral responsibility to create a safe and healthy environment for ourselves and for our children. In addition, over the last 5 years, fewer and fewer Americans are dismissive of the climate crisis, while more and more Americans are alarmed. In fact, the alarmed now outnumber the dismissive by more than 3 to 1. The most dramatic good news emanates, of course, from Joe Biden's all-of-government approach to the climate crisis. Hours after he was sworn in, Biden signed an order for the United States to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. Before he got up from his desk, he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. A week later, Biden blocked any new leasing of federal lands and waters for fossil fuel production, while speeding up the process for permitting renewables. He pledged that the federal government would buy hundreds of thousands of electric cars and trucks. He created a civilian climate corps. He announced that climate change would become a national security priority for the Pentagon. He began the process of eliminating subsidies for fossil fuel companies. And he instructed the Justice Department, the Energy Department, and the Environmental Protection Agency to focus on climate justice, which prompted Dr. Bob Bullard, who is widely considered the father of environmental justice, to say, environmental justice is not a footnote anymore. It's a headline. I can hear the church, the synagogue, the mosque, and the temple continue in this litany. Environmental justice is jobs with justice. Environmental justice is housing justice. Environmental justice is health justice. Environmental justice is climate justice. Environmental justice is indigenous justice. Environmental justice is racial justice. When the sun set on January 27th, Bill McKibben declared that this was the most remarkable day in the history of America's official response to the climate crisis, and that it may well mark the official beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. Over the past few weeks, Congress advanced Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure bill, much of which addresses the climate crisis. And the White House also announced the creation of a White House Environmental Justice Council with an extraordinary group of climate leaders and activists. Less than 2 weeks from now, Biden will convene via Zoom a climate summit of world leaders. This will be a warm-up to the November COP26 talks that will be held in Scotland. Okay, that's some of the good news, but now for a little bit of the bad news. 2 months ago, folks in Dallas woke up to a temperature of -2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 43 degrees below Dallas normal low. Last summer, folks in Siberia, living 70 miles north of the Arctic Circle, were overcome by a daytime high of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, over 50 degrees above normal. Last month, a new study reported that if global warming exceeds 1.5 degrees centigrade, the world's tropics could become uninhabitable. 40% of the world's population live in the tropics. In other words, going forward, every year for the rest of your life will be one of the hottest years ever recorded. Around the world, glaciers are disappearing 5 times faster than they were in the 1960s, and the entire West Antarctic ice sheet could collapse at any time. And when it does, the seas will rise by about 10 feet, which is catastrophic news for tens of millions of people living in many of the world's largest cities, because those cities are only 3 feet above sea level. Scientists agree that the global climate system is approaching numerous tipping points where feedback loops take over and the window of possibility for preventing catastrophe closes. Now, rather than offer more examples, let me just provide you with a little bit of perspective. If you look back in time at the Earth's climate, you'll see that it's only over the past 10,000 years, about 400 generations, that the climate has provided humanity a stable enough pattern for people to depend on. In fact, it's that dependable climate that allowed humanity to settle down, to farm our own food, and to live in year-round communities. Thus, civilization emerges and depends upon a stable climate, or what I like to call the continuity of creation. But that continuity is now broken. Once the industrial era began, it took us only 7 generations to decreate the planet. Over the past 200 years, humanity has extracted and burned about half the oil, coal, and gas that nature took 150 million years to make. That's how the developed countries have built the modern world. In doing so, a tiny percentage of us became unimaginably wealthy, profiting from the control over and abuse of God's creation. And at the same time, a majority of people worldwide are living amidst increased inequality, poverty, hunger, homelessness, and a lack of potable water. These injustices are all casualties of the unjust acquisition, extraction, distribution, and profit from the energy stored under our feet. And to address these injustices, humanity must complete the greatest transition we've ever attempted, moving from our dependency on fossil fuel to a reliance on renewable and sustainable forms of energy. And as most of you already know, we can do this. We already have all the solutions we need to undertake this transition. A group of the world's top climate scientists just issued a report indicating that electricity from solar, wind, and water could power the entire world in less than 10 years. And by 2035, renewable energy could also be the sole energy source for the world's heating, cooling, transportation, and industry. A few years ago, I joined Cardinal O'Malley and other interfaith leaders in Massachusetts as we teamed up with the scientists from Woods Hole and founded the Faith Science Alliance. I can't say strongly enough how important it is for every faith leader and climate activist to persistently applaud the life-giving brilliance of our scientists. But of course, having the solutions available is not enough. Politicians, industry leaders, and consumers need to embrace those solutions and make the necessary transitions. But over the past many decades, the alarms of the scientists have been muzzled by the fossil fuel industry climate denial disinformation campaign. Every congregation could watch the documentary Merchants of Doubt, or read the book, which thoroughly examines the issue of science denial funded by fossil fuel companies. So at about the same time that Senator James Inhofe declared that his God would never allow climate change, a group of Middlebury College students and their professor began planning a day of climate actions. And lo and behold, in 2007, activists emerged in 1,400 towns and cities all over the US. A year later, they founded 350.org and the climate movement began. Only a movement could turn the ship of state. Only a movement could counteract the hundreds of millions of dollars being spent by the fossil fuel industry on climate denial ads. Only a movement could compel politicians to turn down campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry and sign on to the Green New Deal. The emerging climate movement was different from the environmental movement of the 70s, 80s, and 90s in three crucial ways. Beginning in 2011, the climate movement focused on the supply side of the problem. Our first goal was to stop the Keystone XL pipeline from being built. Our witness began when 1,253 of us were arrested in front of the White House. On Ash Wednesday 2013, I was arrested with about 50 others, again in front of the White House. The campaign was driven by indigenous leaders as well as cowboy landowners. Obama heard us. Then Trump overrode Obama. And on his first day in office, Biden finally canceled the KXL pipeline. The Keystone campaign inspired hundreds of additional protests. Many have succeeded in canceling pipelines, some have failed. But as we're learning with the Weymouth compressor station, it's not over, even when it seems like it's over. This is where faithfulness comes in. The indigenous leaders at Standing Rock inspired thousands to join them and put their bodies on the line. And faithful indigenous leaders in Minnesota are doing the same as they protest Line 3. All of these actions focus on the supply side, or as the campaign sometimes calls it, keeping it in the ground. Another supply side focus is the recent Stop the Money pipeline. This began in 2013 with the divestment movement. And in less than 8 years, portfolios worth over $14.5 trillion have purged their holdings of fossil fuel stocks. More recently, Jane Fonda and thousands more have pressured JP Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, and other banks to stop lending money to fossil fuel companies as they continue to build new fossil fuel infrastructure. As Bill McKibben says, money is the oxygen on which the fire of the climate crisis burns. Another quality of the climate movement is that it is an intersectional movement. Since its beginning in 2007, the climate movement has been increasingly led by people of color and indigenous people, and something more. Houses of worship need to recognize what the climate movement has grasped from the beginning, that every justice issue you care about, hunger, poverty, homelessness, immigration, disease, lack of access to clean water and education, all these justice issues are intersectional, and climate change is making every one of them worse. And a third distinctive feature is that the climate movement is being led now by youth. Their audacious vision, their unbound courage, their uncompromising commitment, and their brilliant strategic messaging on social media, all of these qualities earned the respect and renewed the hope of hundreds of millions of people worldwide, including Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Gina McCarthy, Michael Reagan, and John Kerry. All of this leads to the recognition that you and I are living on the hinge of history. The climate crisis has placed an inescapable moral claim on our generation and therefore on each of us. Whatever understanding of God we may have, that God is calling us to embrace a fresh understanding of human fulfillment and vocation as we step up to the fact that it's truly up to us. Like the greater generation, can we adjust our personal aspirations in order to address the greatest threat humanity has ever faced? Can we exchange the dominant ethos of rugged individualism for a recognition that we're all in this together? In place of the American dream of consumption, we must rediscover the beauty, diversity, and healing qualities of the natural world. We must learn that meaning and joy derive less from self-interest, status, and prestige, and more from equality, community, vulnerability, and empathy. Thank God for early adapters like all of you, and for the individuals and organizations who have inspired you to hear the still small voice of God calling you to engage this challenge. And thank God that we are now living in a moment where the vast majority of our neighbors and communities are concerned and alarmed. They need someone they can trust, someone like you, to help them adapt their lives so that they can become more resilient to the crises that are on our doorstep. Many will need help grieving, as Taliesin said earlier, grieving for the loss of the world we no longer inhabit. And by helping others embrace their grief, you'll help them to see that they are not alone. We can and must grieve together. And the solidarity we experience will not only renew our strength, our grief and solidarity will set the stage for hope. And here I must be clear. You are not preparing yourself or the communities you serve to return to normal. Rather, God is calling you and all of us to help our communities face engage, befriend, take pleasure in, and find joy in saying goodbye to normal as we begin together to write a new story that's rooted in resilience in place of growth, collaboration in place of consumption, interdependence in place of rugged individualism, wisdom in place of progress, balance in place of addiction, moderation in place of excess, vision in place of convenience, accountability in place of disregard, and self-giving love in place of self-centered fear. It takes courage to pivot in all of these ways as we relinquish our dependence on fossil fuel. Trust is also essential, a deep trust that another way is possible, and that we are loved by a God who is calling us to embark on a new journey. In addition to courage and trust, another essential quality is gratitude. When we fully accept that all of creation is a gift, gratitude fills our hearts and wonder fills our minds. As the author of creation becomes more and more apparent, our inclination to share as we create a more just, equitable, and sustainable society increases. Finally, I want to urge you to cultivate your moral imagination. Every prophet did just that, from those in our ancient scriptures to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to the prophet we affectionately refer to as AOC. They teach us that the only way we can cross the abyss from the perils of our current story to the story God is calling us to champion is to nurture, to cultivate our moral imagination. You and I have been called to this work and witness amidst one of the greatest transformations in all of human history. That transformation, it's only the beginning. May you continue to call upon your courage, manifest your trust, share your gratitude, and follow your moral imagination so that a new story may emerge in every community you serve. Let the people say, Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reverend Jim. Thank you for pointing us to the possibilities that are within our grasp in today's times. And thank you for reminding us that we are all change agents or can be change agents in helping to shape and create the world that we want to see. So again, thank you so kindly. Our next step, we are going to move into the breakout groups. So if you will give us a few minutes, we will put you in the breakout groups. And just in case someone asked, this video recorded, the sessions are being recorded and it will be made available next week. The breakout groups are not recorded, but so far the session has been recorded so that the talk, the keynote, and all the other aspects of the program you can see on the recording that will be on Crew's YouTube channel that we will make public next week. Someone asked, could they see the remarks again? So we will have that. So we'll just give it a few more minutes for our tech folks. Perhaps Margaret could break us into small groups, and then we will go into our small group portion. we will now have a report out from each group. So how about we start with the building resilience? Would one of the facilitators like to report how did the conversation go? And then there is also room for other facilitators to chime in. So would one of the facilitators from the building resilience group like to start? And then let's go from there.
We did not pre-select a report back person, as this may be evident. But I can briefly say we talked, we had I'm a UU minister, we had a Zen practitioner, and a Jewish chaplain for the Red Cross. And we talked about like building resilience by being prepared and being ready for when the trauma and catastrophe hits. We talked about the impossibility of the task we are setting out to do and how we have to do it anyway. We talked about secondary resilience, like gaining resilience from other people's resilience instead of only gaining the trauma from other people's trauma. And we talked about faith and science. That was a question that was raised, how we connect them and how we use faith to make meaning and get purpose, which can help make use of the tools of science. There may be other things I didn't just mention if Shira or Greg want to jump in.
We also talked about,
Oh,
sorry, please go ahead.
no. You.
We also talked about how there is resilience building, and the emphasis is on the building prior to a trauma that happens, and then actually at the same time responding to the trauma and helping people build resilience by connecting them to their faith traditions, to their resources, that family resources, friends, resources, etc. So it's resilience on both sides, and taking care of one's own trauma and response to trauma provides, in effect, a little bit of a buffer so that we don't fall into the abyss of compassion fatigue, because there's so much to do, as you so beautifully put it. In the Zen tradition, there's an impossible amount of stuff to do, and we still have to do it anyway. So making sure that we find a way to protect ourselves from compassion fatigue as we are trying to support the world and support the people in it is really important.
I really appreciated the importance of the emphasis on faith and the different understandings of faith, and how important it is to access that in our own hearts and minds. I also really appreciated the emphasis on community building. This deep understanding that we are, and along with all of creation, along with all of existence, all threatened species, of which we are one. To understand that, and then from that understanding, we build community. We build multiple communities and reach out to other people across intersectionality, across the internet, across whatever is dividing us, to build these connections. I think this is the frontline work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all three of you, for providing a succinct recap of what sounded like a very dynamic and a robust and engaging conversation. So thank you all for sharing. Perhaps we can go to the next group, the helping facilitators. That was Evelyn Sullivan. That was Evelyn Sullivan. That was John Luke and Reverend Dr. Rodney Peterson. So perhaps you could share with with us some of the conversations that happened in your group.
This is Evelyn. I would like to share, what I found of, great help and interest, to me personally was, having the faith, focus people, how, like, like all the faith, working with the climate change, all the different groups and how much, the different, faith organizations, really work and help the community, working with climate change and all the, the results of, people affected by climate change. So for me as a Red Cross volunteer who is always in a disaster mode, I found that to really help me a lot. And I found it helpful watching your last year's presentation, because like I said, I'm always in the disaster mode. And then when we start working in preparedness, a lot of times I have to really switch hats going from disaster over to preparedness. And that can be, a challenge because, when we get, in one mode, it's kind of hard. And now you've really brought a lot to the, to light here for me as far as the climate change and the effects of climate change, even though I work with it all the time, the disaster end, seeing it from, the faith side has been very, very important for me. That's it.
Yeah. And just to kind of build off of Evelyn, with the faith side, definitely all that we do, when we talk about tradition, we talk about faith, we have to kind of acknowledge the power of prayer, of song. Everything that we do has to come from the heart. And also we have to first affirm that the people that we are helping are doing all that they can to help themselves, to help their family, to help their community. So we have to first listen to the people that we are helping and provide whatever resource they need. And again, it has to come from that tradition. It has to come from the prayers. It has to come from the songs. It has to come from whatever we do to represent who we are in faith. And so I just want to give any words to Rodney from here.
Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know if the Reverend Dr. Rodney Peterson wants to add anything, but thank you so much, John Luke, and thank you so much, Evelyn, for sharing some of the insightful conversation that was discussed among you all. Now we are going to move over to the healing facilitators or breakout group, where we have the Reverend Thomas McGrove, Schwab, and we also have the Rabbi Katie Allen, but she had to leave for another event. Perhaps one of our facilitators want to start. Perhaps Thomas, you would like to give a recap of what we talked about, and then perhaps others could chime in from our group.
I think each of us talked about healing, the importance of hope in all three traditions, the importance of stewardship of all creation. And as a Red Cross disaster spiritual care volunteer, I talked about how everyone with the Red Cross who is involved in disaster service provides a compassionate presence to those in need. It was wonderful to me to see the same threads coming through Islam and Judaism. And I think that I kind of hoped we'd have a chance to have more of a conversation within our group, but what we did have, I thought, was very, very valuable. Shua?
Yes, definitely. I concur with what Thomas said. And I also had a lot. We could have talked for a couple of hours on it, I think. But the thing is that if we can give concrete solutions and to have some questions or maybe have the presentation that I could have more on like a slideshow, but because of the time, I don't think there was enough to do that. So I would say still that staying connected to yourself and seek help when you need it, find ways to find help, whether it's for your healing or when we talk about environment, which we are for the climate, we are getting together and finding help and seeking help and trying to do something about it, whether we do it at home at our smaller levels, about healing the climate and our homes. If we are healing at home, then our climate will be healed or the communities will be healing. It starts at home. So I think coming back to our reporting back from our group was there were a couple of questions. They were from a couple of people. They said that I think we need to change our mindset or the narrative, and we can have some. So that is a very hopeful thing also, I think, to have the room to change. And definitely we all the traditions do not want to lose hope, definitely not. Hope is what keeps us going. Hope is why we all are here. I think diversity is good. We should appreciate and acknowledge and really be very happy that we all are diverse, we all are coming from different traditions, and this is intentionally done by the creator so that we have so much variety and learn from each other to improve upon each other instead of looking down upon each other and build on it. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much to you both for sharing some of the insightful information that was discussed in our breakout group, and just sharing helpful information and relevant information, particularly for times like this that we are living in. So thank you both. Thank you to all the facilitators and all those who have shared. We will now transition to our next portion, which is next steps and resources. So I'm going to turn it over to Margaret, and we have a few crew team members that will highlight next steps and resources. So I'm going to turn it over to Margaret for this portion for a couple minutes. And then we're going to hand it over to our partners at FEMA to discuss what they have going on related to vaccination rollout. So without further ado, let's go ahead, Margaret.
Thanks, Vernon. So I'm just going to share my screen a little bit. Can everybody see? Can everybody see a slide that says next steps?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's important that we don't stop the work here, that we carry the work forward and view this just as one step in a journey of many. And so Crew has a couple of events coming up that you might be interested in. One is our Climate Resilience Hub program. So Climate Resilience Hubs are community institutions. They can be churches, other faith groups, libraries, schools that commit to educating their communities about extreme weather and the connections to climate change, and educating communities on how they can prepare and then respond when those events do happen. So we have a couple upcoming events. One is an information session about this for faith communities specifically, It's going to be Thursday, May 6th from 3 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, in case anyone's on other time zones. And we can put the registration links in the chat. The event will be recorded, so if any of you can't make it, you can look online for the video. Then we also have some information sessions, not specifically for faith communities, but for anybody on other days. Thursday, May 13th at 7, Tuesday, May 18th at 12, and Monday, May 24th at 7 p.m. And we can put a link to our website with more information too. So right now we have 62 hubs and growing. And I'm going to turn it over to Grace to talk about an event coming up on April 20th.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret. So yeah, on April 20th, we have a collective resilience event coming up called Building Equitable Emergency Preparedness in Our Communities. And so we're going to talk about the disproportionate impacts of climate change and the inequities inherent in those impacts and in emergency relief, and how we can plan for a better, more inclusive future. And I think a lot of what we talked about today, at least in our breakout rooms, were like the mindfulness of getting entire communities connected and how that can just be resilience alone. So we're going to hear from a bunch of great speakers, and we'd love to have you all there. I will drop the link in the chat in case anybody wants to register. And yeah, it's from, sorry, and just to repeat the date, it's from on Tuesday, April 20th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. And it'll be an hour of speakers and then 30 minutes of breakout discussion. And I think from there we can hand it off to Vernon.
Thank you all. Thank you. So we just want to highlight at this portion, and then we're going to turn it over to our FEMA partner. And then we'll, after our FEMA partner has shared some information, then we'll go into our closing. So some of our partners, for example, like the Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light, they have a website. Check it out, www.massipl.org. They're part of a national organization of Interfaith Power and Light. So you see a little bit of what they do here. We have the Earth Day 2021, or the Boston Earth Day 2021. They have an event coming up in a few weeks, I'm thinking about 2 weeks or so. We will send that. We'll send more specific information about that in our follow-up email. We also have an event by Mashkosh, which is also a co-sponsor. They have a New England town hall and listening session with OSHA on Tuesday, April 20th at 5:30. We'll send information about that and the registration link for that. We also have the conference happening with Jewish Climate Action Network. I believe that may be April 25th. Again, we will also include that with more details and with links that you can check out. Speak for the Trees is having several events actually, and there will be links to that to talk more about that. It's called the Arbor Week, the Arbor Week calendar, and again we will put that in the we'll put that in the email, the follow-up email that we send you all. And don't forget, just as a reminder, there is an unstructured networking hour right after this from about 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. With Lee. Lee is somewhere on the chat. She and Jenny Bottom Carter will be facilitating that. So we'll share all that out. We just wanted to give you a sample of what's happening. So I believe Jedi, can you come to the virtual mic? Jedi is from the FEMA Region 1. Introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about the vaccination rollout. And before you do that, we also did a vaccination preparedness event the other day on Friday. We did that with Dr. Regina LaRoque and some other thought leaders in the emergency response field. We will share that video. We specifically recorded that video for our Interfaith Summit participants to watch and look. There's a lot of demystifying of the vaccination of the vaccine and the process with it from mostly from an infectious disease doctor, Regina LaRoque, from Massachusetts General Hospital. So we will be sending that out in next week. So pay attention to your email. So Jedediah, please come on up. I'm sorry for interjecting on you, but I just remembered to share that. But please come on up.
No worries. Thanks, Vernon. My name is Jed Fiato, and I'm a consultant with FEMA in Region 1. So for those of you who are not familiar, Region 1 is Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. So we serve those territories. I would like to talk to you guys, and I'm going to share my screen, Vernon, if that's okay. I've got a few slides I'd like to show that I think will illustrate some of the points I would like to make. Can you guys see my screen? Great. Okay. So one of the things I want to talk about today briefly is FEMA's efforts in Region 1 to engage communities across the region around vaccination hesitancy. And one of the things that I would like to share right off the bat is some data that is, pretty current, but right now, COVID-19 has had a pretty heavily disproportionate impact on communities of color. Specifically, when we look at the death rate, the hospitalization rate, and we'd also have to highlight Latinx people and Indigenous people groups as well, who have a serious disproportionate impact when it comes to hospitalization. So right off the bat, when we're taking a look at our vaccination efforts, we have to acknowledge the fact that the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact right from the start. Let me see here, I'll change my slide. When it comes to hesitancy, which is really something that we're trying to tackle right now in the region, the hesitancy rate or the skeptical rate is about almost 60% of people polled or surveyed in the Black community. So you can see here in the orange, skeptical 33%, 25% in the red, which is much larger than we see for white folks. And then we see some of the same trends for Hispanics as well. It doesn't have Indigenous people on this chart, unfortunately. But this was a study that was conducted by the Ad Council. I believe the CDC was involved, a few pharmaceutical companies. And one of the things that was alarming right from the start is that in terms of why people are hesitant, distrust in the political and economic motives of government, and then established and novel conspiracy theories was also a huge trend when looking at why people are hesitant in these communities. I think I have one more slide here. Yeah, another slide here. This was another survey question for the general public. But one of the things that I want to point to that I think is really important is that when people were asked, I feel confident that I know enough to guide my decision about getting a COVID-19 vaccine, 60% of the public agreed, but then in the Black and Hispanic community, we only see 40% there. So again, disproportionate impact and then disproportionate numbers when it comes to hesitancy rates. And this is my last slide here that I'll share, and then I'll get into some of the things that we're up to. But this is a really nice chart because it shows here trust and reach in terms of who is a correct or a messenger or a messenger that is at least trusted, and then has a large reach as well. One of the things that continues to come up when we're having conversations in the region is that religious leaders score high in trust. And so these are the folks probably who are represented here on this call today, is that people of faith, people that are active in their community, and faith organizations, they score high in trust, not as much of a reach as we'd like to see, but that's where I think we could start to make a shift because we're already scoring high in trust. But we need to expand our reach. We see like news media, CDC, public health experts, thank God they're scoring high in reach and in trust. But where we really think that we can make a difference is in this religious leader category. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick and just talk a little bit about what we're up to. So one of the things, some of the challenges that we're seeing is mostly around institutional distrust, especially in communities of color and low income communities where faith institutions are heavily relied upon. Institutional distrust is a huge factor when it comes to the vaccine rollout. Another challenge is that we need to start promoting voices of community champions in racially diverse communities. The communities that rank highest in vaccination hesitancy, the community champions that are involved in those communities, they need to have their voices lifted. Another challenge that we see is knowledge, being comfortable and informed about the vaccine. Over and over again in these forums that we're holding, and then in just a lot of the poll research and data that's coming out, information and being comfortable with that information, we're seeing lower rates in low-income communities and diverse communities that are scoring high in hesitancy rates. Another thing that we're seeing is that representation really does matter. We recently heard from in one of our talk shops, and I'll get into what talk shop is because I think it's a great resource for people that are on this call. We heard from a public health official in Boston, Nancy Smith, who's been doing a lot of work at the Reggie Center in Boston, which was strategically placed and set up in a racially diverse community in order to promote the vaccination in that community. And one of the shocking things that they saw right off the bat is that although the Reggie Center is placed in a racially diverse community, most of the people that were getting vaccines at that center early on were white folks. So it wasn't serving the intended purpose. And one of the things that they changed was the folks that were receiving people at the door that were administering the vaccine were not representing the people that they were trying to serve. So they made some changes there, and they saw some dramatic results that were positive. So representation does matter. In terms of resources, and I'll quickly move through this, FEMA Region 1 has a civil rights cadre that is currently heading up an equity forum. It's twice monthly. We just had a forum on Friday with a lot of participation from around the region. We had one 2 weeks ago as well on vaccination hesitancy and best practices. So I encourage you to involve yourself in that, because one of the ways that FEMA can do its job better is to hear from voices in the community about how FEMA should be doing outreach, how we should be engaging. So the Equity Forum is a great place to make your voice heard and to see how you can get more involved and how you can distribute resources and how you can best message vaccination rollout and to encourage getting vaccine. Another monthly forum that we have that's been very effective in creating a community of informed responders is we have a monthly talk shop in the region too, in the preparedness division, the second Thursday of the month. And the last couple of talk shops that we've had, one has been on vaccination hesitancy, another one has been on vaccination equity, and then we had another one on inclusive community organizing and inclusive community planning and preparedness. And those talk shops host experts in the field that are able to deliver information and to inform the audience, and then offers an opportunity for engagement and conversation afterwards. So I encourage you to attend those as well. And hopefully we can get my contact information shared here too, Vernon, so that we can connect folks with that. Another great resource is Open. And Open is a training that we do called Organizations Prepared for Emergency Needs. And the training is primarily focused on building capacity at the community level and local level, because that's really where change happens. And so we want to offer this to faith-based organizations churches and other faith-based organizations that are interested in learning more about how to be prepared, how to organize, how to use their institution or organization as a way to promote preparedness in the community. Part of the reason why the pandemic has hit hardest in low-income and racially diverse communities is because racially diverse and low-income communities are often not represented very well in preparedness efforts. And really, in order to combat a pandemic or combat a disaster, we know it starts with being prepared at a community level. Another great resource is VOAD, which is Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. If you are not a part of a VOAD in your home state, I encourage you to join one. And if you would like to learn more about what a VOAD is, please reach out to us and I'll connect you with the right folks to get you connected with your local VOAD. But VOAD, we need to see VOAD grow across the region, because when disaster hits, the organizations that are effective and change are the organizations that are already connected to each other and don't have to do on-the-go networking. On-the-go networking is not very effective. We need to do that prior to when a disaster hits, prior to a pandemic. So with that, I will leave it there. I know I just hit you with a bunch of information. I know I went over time, but right now I'm a little clumsy because I just got my vaccine like 2 hours ago. And so I appreciate
No problem. Thank you for that. We'll share all those resources. We'll share all those resources in next week's email. So thank you for that. We're going to move to the closing of this program. And again, thank you so much, Jedediah. The Reverend Dr. Balmasi, if you could come on up to the virtual mic, we so certainly do appreciate this. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say, I've been so moved by the talent and the passion and the insight of all the people here. What I propose to do at Vernon's request is just have a little bit of a closing out. And what I'd like to suggest as a mode is I'm going to offer a very, very brief reflection, like 2 or 3 sentences in 4 categories, just about unity, grief, hope, and our sense of call. And after I finish, again, just a few sentences, I'm going to offer a sentence that all of us, if you wish, can repeat to sort of bring us together. So I would really invite you. First of all, I apologize. I had pulled together some wonderful quotes across many religious and spiritual traditions. We don't really have time for those, but the point of sharing them was just how much unity there is among us. And I apologize for those that I may not be representing or may have left out inadvertently. I'd love for you to close your eyes and just find that space inside where we can take a few deep breaths and remember that we're human, and remember that although separated by space, we're not separated by spirit. So let us pray. Let us go into that quiet space for a moment. Gracious God, powerful Spirit, we know in our hearts that we are one. We're very different. We come from different backgrounds. We have different personalities and feelings, different passions, but at the root, we are human, created brothers and sisters who are bound together, who long to be together, and who are capable of great deeds and great love if we remember those powerful ties between us. Those ties are sacred, and we need them now as we confront the great challenges ahead. So I invite you to say with me, I'll say it once and then you can join me. I believe we share a sacred bond among us. Okay, I believe we share a sacred bond among us. Now I wish to raise up the grief that many of us have spoken about. The grief can be absolutely overwhelming as we think of all the terrible things that have happened and all of the things that we as human beings have participated in, either ourselves or those we know or those we don't know, either in the past or in the present. We think of all the things that have been destroyed needlessly. We think of the cruelty and the greed, the power, the silencing, the oppression, the agony that we inflict on each other for no reason at all. And we cannot hide from that grief. We cannot fully protect ourselves from that grief, but we can share it. We can admit it. We can recognize the degree that we have been damaged by it as a step towards being healed. The common sentence is, I feel sorrow to the depth of my soul. I feel sorrow to the depth of my soul. We also know that we live in a world that contains enormous hope. Even though there's destruction, even though there are all the dark forces around us, we also see popping up in every generation, including this one, the little crocuses and flowers that are poking up through what seems an inhospitable surface. And they continue to grow, they start to bloom, they start to interact with each other. And we thank you, O Spirit, that we've seen these now, especially in the last few years, as more and more people are waking up and stretching their arms and being awakened to the power that we have together, being awakened to the need to exercise that power, being able to see that there's much that is still beautiful about the world, and that if we can find that unity and overcome that grief, we can move into a world of hope again. Let us find that hope. And the sentence is, I feel hope and joy to see the shoots of deep change coming up around us. I feel hope and joy to see shoots of deep change coming up around us. And the final thing, when we spend time like this together, learning from each other, gaining facts we didn't know, perspectives we had not heard before, personalities that we admire, opportunities that we see are possible, we also, many of us, feel called by the spirit that binds us, the spirit that brought us all into being, into this universe, into being. And that call to act or to grow or to change is exactly what we need at each moment of history, especially in moments at the hinge of history, as Jim Antal reminded us. So let us embrace that sense of calling as we go forth from this meeting. Let it be fueled and strengthened by seeing it in each other's lives, each other's eyes. Let us come together as we have never come together before to do what may seem impossible, but which must be attempted and which may, if we work together, become inevitable. And our sentence together is, I feel called by the Spirit to meet the moment with whatever gifts and abilities I have. I feel called by the Spirit to meet the moment with whatever gifts and abilities I have. So many blessings on all of you, and thank you for your courage and your compassion and for your willingness to do what seems impossible. But I trust in what we can do together, and I send you my respect, admiration, affection, and love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate that. Lee, can you come on and guide us in our unstructured hour and provide instructions? And again, thank you so much, Bob.